More than a dozen cities and towns across the USA, some in coastal communities as big as the Big Apple and as small as tiny Imperial Beach, California, have filed lawsuits against fossil fuel companies, blaming them for the effects of climate change. Now, a state is suing. My state, the Ocean State. Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo says that given that we have a president in the White House who denies climate change and has pulled out of the Paris Accord, it puts a greater burden on states to take action. And naming ExxonMobil, Chevron, BP, and Royal Dutch Shell among 14 defendants, our state attorney general did just that, charging that big oil knew for decades that greenhouse gas pollution from their operations and their products were having a significant and detrimental impact on the Earth's climate. How detrimental? Let's ask Dr. Reese Halter, an eco-stress physiologist specializing in Earth's life support systems. He is the author of, among other books, Save Nature Now. The Rhode Island suit accuses big oil companies of refuting scientific findings about greenhouse gas pollution from fossil fuel products, violates the state's Environmental Rights Act by polluting natural resources, and wants companies to pay for damages, citing costs to repair roads and bridges and to rebuild coastal structures. Reese, tiny Rhode Island has 400 miles of coastline, so we're not crying wolf about rising sea levels, are we?
We know that when you burn a solid, a chunk of coal or a gallon of gasoline, so a solid and a liquid, it turns into a gas. We know that. This is the 21st century. I am very proud to be a scientist. We know that. We also know that 93% of that gas, when we burn a fossil fuel, is in the ocean. We know, because scientists meticulously count, 560 billion metric tons of carbon heat in the ocean. That translates into 300 zetajoules of energy, heat. We know that the oceans are becoming deoxygenated. Warm water holds less oxygen. We know that the level of acidity is coming up. So if you're a shellfish, that means, or a coral reef, that means when it's more acidic, your shell or the coral melts. They are melting. We know that. We also know, Holland, that the days are hotter. The heat waves are higher. They're lasting longer. The droughts are worse. The storms are more intense. And we all know, because just look around wherever you live in America, in any town or city, 36 million city and town trees a year are dying. It's too hot. No trees, no shade, no animals. And when there's no animals, by the way, we're an animal, so we're next.
Reese,
these are hard.
Yeah, what's done is done, but can electric cars and other alternatives make a meaningful difference going forward?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. We take this $5.3 trillion subsidy away from big oil, gas, and coal, and we future-proof every town and city. We have the solar, the concentrated solar centers now that create supercritical steam that is easily equal, if not better, to any of the gas plants. And we have the lithium-ion battery power stations, and we can power every town and city on planet Earth right now. As a matter of fact, I'm throwing this forth. You give me 5 years of fossil fuel subsidies, $25 trillion, Holland, and I will equip our planet solar and green energy, and we walk completely from fossil fuels. How good is that?
You leave coal and oil in the ground where God put it, right?
Hell yes.
Now let's turn to America's lawyer, Mike Papantonio. Mike, welcome to The Big Picture.
Good to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
These David-and-Goliath lawsuits get lots of media attention, but how many actually win? What are some notable examples of the little guy beating the big corporation?
Well, you can do that, but it has to be under the right pleading. It has to be under the right theory. The reason these climate change cases, for example, are being dismissed is because the pleading is not where it should be. For example, Rhode Island just filed a case a couple of weeks ago, and their argument is that they want to go after all of the oil companies and they want to hold them responsible for the damage that's evident to everybody who's honest and paying attention. But what they've done, they've overreached, Holland. The best way, and it'll be dismissed. That's my prediction. It'll be, and if it's not dismissed at this trial level, it'll be dismissed at the appellate level. There's a problem that they have, and the problem has to do with something we call causation, and that is that these companies in particular were responsible for the problem. The SMART case that's out there, it's brilliant actually, was the case on behalf of children that have brought the case, and I think it's filed in Denver.
Yeah, Colorado.
Colorado. So these children brought the case, and they said, look, we're not asking for anything from the oil companies. You know what we're doing? We are demanding that the government follow the law, the Clean Air Act. So it's a totally different approach. It's what we call a writ of mandamus. The mandamus says that you in the process of governing have a responsibility to follow the law. The law is very clear. The Clean Air Act says exactly what they're supposed to do. The EPA hasn't done it. Government hasn't done it on the state level. They haven't done it on the federal level. And that's what that case is about. The judge has allowed that to go forward because he can't make a decision as a matter of law. Here's the difference. As a matter of law, he can't say, well, your writ of mandamus doesn't have merit to it. A judge on the other side, the kind that's been brought in Rhode Island, can, as a matter of law, say, look, I've looked at the information, you've got a duty analysis, you have breach of duty analysis, and then you have a causation problem, and you're not able to show that their conduct was the direct cause of this. So the two kinds of cases are very different.
From the Rhode Island lawsuit, the state contends as a direct and proximate consequence of defendants' wrongful conduct described in this complaint, average sea level will rise substantially along Rhode Island's coast, average temperatures and extreme heat days will increase, flooding, extreme precipitation events such as tropical storms and hurricanes, and drought will become more frequent and more severe, and the ocean will warm and become more acidic. To paraphrase the Watergate Committee way back when, what did Big Oil know and when did they know it?
Well, we know that they knew in 1940s. Exxon has documents that go all the way back to the 40s where they are actually doing metric models to find out what was actually going on with climate change. They knew about it. As a matter of fact, there's about 182 articles that Exxon alone had. They only released, I think they released less than 2% of the articles, and even then, they phonied those articles up. They had what I call biostitutes, people in universities that were willing to work for extra money.
Biostitutes.
Biostitutes. You give me enough money and I'll say anything.
Right.
So they had biostitutes go to work for their industry, and they created this phonied up science that says there's no relationship between man-made, between what's happening in the climate and any conduct by man. So they knew what they were doing. The case that the children in Colorado, they'll use that. And what the way the case will lay itself out is they'll say to these government officials, you had the same caliber of notice that Exxon had, okay?
Right.
You could have, you should have, you didn't. And you haven't done anything for all of these decades, and as a result of that, we're mandating you to follow the law. You have to start there, Holland.
Right.
You can't skip that step, unfortunately.
In a statement responding to the Rhode Island suit, Shell Oil contends that lawsuits that masquerade as climate action impede the collaboration needed for meaningful change. These big oil companies talk a good game about being energy companies,
yeah.
But we often hear about all of the above solutions and clean coal. Meanwhile, aren't they doing everything they can with this permissive president and Congress to just drill, baby, drill?
Well, unfortunately, that is true, but let's not lose sight of the fact that the Obama administration allowed more drilling than has ever happened under any president in the United States. So, we can't be tribal about how we look at this. If we're tribal, we're not really getting to the problem, and the problem has to do with the money in politics. But in this particular situation, what we have is the long drawn out statement is this: we don't know. We don't have enough information. That went on for decades. That's what moved the government from taking action. If you go back and even look at some of the things that the Secretary of Energy did, that the EPA did under the Obama administration, well, we don't have enough information. You really can't tell us that all this drilling is going to cause problems. Now turn that up. Understand that was Obama.
Sure.
Put gasoline on the fire.
Let the good times roll.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. With Trump, let the good times roll. Exactly.
So it may not have been the Rhode Island AG's intent that this is just a publicity stunt, but you're not bullish on this action as it stands.
No, I think good for him. Okay, what it does is it raises political consciousness. It raises social consciousness. But somebody should have said. Unfortunately, most attorney generals really don't have a lot of they don't have a lot of experience actually trying cases.
They're elected.
They're elected. They're politicos. The AG means almost governor. So that's where this guy's headed with this.
Mike Papantonio, America's lawyer. Thank you for stepping into the big picture.
Thank you for inviting me.